another will show you another way. So put your glasses on, nothing will be wrong. There's no blame, there's no fame, it's up to you. The first brush you'll be finding, whatever holds you back. I can't get it all. Tell me why, tell me why, tell me what you want. I don't know why, don't know why, don't know what to say. Tell me why, tell me why, tell me what you say. I don't know why, don't know why, too late, it's too late. I don't feel for real, it's just like
I love this game. Hello and welcome to Hidden Values, a show where I, your host Noah Price, a Christian gamer who loves RPGs, JRPGs, is gonna be tackling Dark Souls today. We cover RPGs, we do reviews. Really, we just talk about the influences or any hidden values. Basically, yeah, influences that are within the games we play. Any connections to different religions or even some philosophies that we might have to look into and maybe be aware of. Or at the very least, learn more about the games we just love. Dark Souls is a beloved franchise that has a massive cult following, and even those who have never played the game, who most likely have heard of the series, are in awe and respect of the game for its renown of its almost genre-making game. Yes, this is mostly due to its known difficulty of being a really hard get good game, sprinkled in with a little bit of obscurity of its storytelling style. Nowadays, if you are playing a game that lets you roll and then there's any kind of hint of difficult in it, then it's a Souls-like. It's just like Dark Souls. I was always afraid to play this game, to take that initial step to play this game because of its difficulty. I always thought in my mind it's too difficult for me to play, or I shouldn't waste my time on it. But let me tell you what, once I started playing on it, oh baby, I kind of quit not too long into it. I can explain. It's not because I got bored, that's for sure. It is because this game is hard. Well, if you haven't built the right amount of skills to play the... We'll get into it. But for the most part, yes, the game is hard for at least new players. And it wasn't until later on in life that I decided, no, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna beat this game. So as I started playing this game once more with great conviction to beat this game at all odds, I learned what was so great about this game. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, I was very intimidated to make this video just because of its story and its lore. The little sprinkle on top of what this game's known for is its storytelling style of basically obscurity. It is really hard for the average player to understand the story. It's very, very common to, if you have beaten the game, which many haven't, but if you have beaten the game, to finish it and be like, I'm not really sure what will happen. I was kind of there. I was there. So yes, this is not going to be a video really closely on the lore of Dark Souls. When I originally beat this game, I was headlong into the lore and fascinated by this game's story. I've forgotten a lot of it because I have a really awful memories. You're gonna have to forgive me there. If you really want it, maybe in the future I'll bring a upgraded, a next level video. But for now, we are gonna be talking about some influences that we find within the game that the creators had when making this game. But if you do want the story to be somewhat clearer, to have some kind of understanding of what is the plot of Dark Souls, what is going on, I got you. Let me just The opening cutscene establishes the premise of the game. Dragons once ruled the world during the Age of Ancients. A primordial fire known as the First Flame manifests in the world, establishing a distinction between life and death, and light and dark. Four beings find Lord Souls near the First Flame, granting immense power. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, Nito, the First of Death, the Witch of Izalith, and Furtive, the Pygmy. Gwyn, Nito, and the Witch use their new power to destroy the dragons and take control over the world, while the Furtive Pygmy is said to be forgotten, and thus begins the Age of Fire. Over time, as the First Flame begins to fade while humans rise in power, Gwyn sacrifices himself to prolong the Age of Fire. The main story takes place towards the end of this second age of fire, at which point humanity is said to be afflicted with an undead curse related to a symbol on their bodies known as the dark sign. Those human afflicted with the undead curse perpetually resurrect after death until they eventually lose their minds, a process referred to as hollowing. The player character is a cursed undead locked away in an undead asylum. After escaping the asylum, the player travels to Lordheim to ring the bells of awakening. The bells awaken King Seeker Frount, who tells the player to ascend to Anno Londo, the home of the gods. In Anno Londo, Guinevere instructs the player to succeed Lord Gwyn and fulfill the prophecy. To accomplish this, the player must acquire the Lord Souls of the Witch of Izalith, Nito, the Four Kings, and Dragon Seath, the Scaleless. Optionally, the player may encounter Darkstalker Kaith, who encourages the player not to link the fire, but to let it die out and usher in the Age of Dark instead. Once the player acquires the Lord's Souls, they travel to the kiln of the First Flame to battle Gwyn. Gwyn has been defeated. The player has a choice of linking the flame to preserve the Age of Fire or letting it die out to instigate the Age of Dark. So yeah, that is the main plot of the story, the flow, the structure of the story. Really ultimately splitting into a decision you have to make of, are you going to continue the cycle, the constant cycle, or are you going to disrupt it and change? While yes, continuing the cycle does seem like the safe answer and not necessarily the negative one, it is the one that basically is insanity, leaving with the same actions happening repeatedly over and over. Compared to the dark one, not sure of what will happen if this happens. This is a risk that is being taken place, forsaking what is norm. And with that, can be negative. While as a story structure, this is interesting and I do enjoy this decision, but this isn't why I really love Dark Souls. What I loved about it is the gameplay. I mean, first off, the difficulty. I love the difficulty of this game. A challenging but rewarding gameplay. For the most part, this game is known for being, well, not forgiving. In the sense that it's not unfair. When you die or lose, it does entirely feel like it is your fault. Sure, there's aspects in the game where it is very unfair, but it is far in between. And for the most part, the game's not known for it. If you're playing for the first time, this is a very difficult but rewarding game. Probably the biggest difficult part of this game is its aspect of resurrecting when you die. While this is a normal mechanic in almost every game, unless it has specifically permadeath values, the reason for it and its actual impact consequence-wise is pretty powerful, and it does add that difficult value. The biggest problem is that there's bonfires, and these bonfires are basically your checkpoints. So if you die, you come back to a bonfire. Lighting the bonfire or resting at it again will reset enemies and make them respawn. The real problem is that your death is connected to your money, your currency, which is not only for buying things, but also for leveling up. And through that, once you die, there is a spot where your souls are set. And so basically, when you die, you have to run back and grab your souls. If you die again, you lose your souls, and that's just wasted experience points and wasted time. This element causes so many players frustration, and it's mostly due to themselves getting psyched out of earnestly needing to get their souls back. So they tend to play a little bit more impatient, and it ends up punishing them for it. And it's through that punishment and losing that souls and feeling wasted time that causes the biggest aspect of difficulty in this game. If you take your time always and play patiently, you're not going to lose your souls after you have already died, which will erase a lot of frustration you could have with this game. Other games nowadays have this feature. This Dark Souls experience really was the one that originated it. But when talking about difficulty, Dark Souls is also known for its bosses. And I love this, because not only are the bosses difficult, but they feel like bosses. I know I shouldn't have to say that, but there are tons of times when you play games and when you come to the boss, it doesn't feel like a real challenge. But Dark Souls makes sure that it is difficult. And if not difficult, it's at least intense, interesting, and it just looks cool. It makes you feel cool. It makes you feel, sometimes, I mean, specific fights do get very anime-esque, which as an anime lover I enjoy. Some people may not. Don't worry, it's not every boss, but it is very much unique. And as you saw at the very beginning, the fight against Smough and Ornstein is looked at as probably the hardest boss fight in general. At least for where you're at in the game, at least skill-wise as a player, it's looked at, again, as one of the best fights ever. It was probably one of my favorite fights in this game. I have a soft spot for Sif and Artorias, so that's the hard part, is I like them for lore reasons and story-wise. But as a battle and when I first had impressions of it, Ornstein's and Smough took it away. But don't worry, there is still 2 more big reasons why, as a Christian, I love this game and really respect it. The first one is, well, it's shortcuts. And while this isn't really present in the following Souls games, and it's that this world is connected. You get to actually see other locations that you will eventually travel to. You actually get to see bosses that in the future you will fight. And this aspect makes this game feel just real and actually a lived-in world. This aspect of love that you could feel from the creators is affectionate, unless you're just guns to the wall just fighting every enemy you see next. Then you might not notice it, but if you do take a time from time to time to look at the visuals, which is beautiful at times, you will probably find a fondness and a appreciation for the connection that this world has amongst each other. But that doesn't compare to probably, again, one of my favorite aspects that this game does. And this is for any game that does this. This game's customizable options is great. In Dark Souls, you are not limited to just doing a big boy sword strength build, feeling like you're literally Guts from Berserk. You don't have to just do that, but you can if you want. You can also be a swift, dexterous boy who uses a bow from far away and then gets up close and uses a rapier. You could be a mage who uses powerful spells. Powerful. It's powerful. I mean it. In Dark Souls 1, it is. Or even a faith build, which your boy likes. I love it. Well, it's weird that he's using electricity. It's like almost saying he's Zeus. He's not Zeus. I'm not a Zeus boy. I'm a Christian. You know, I have faith in the Lord. You better believe it. It does have its problems because obscurity-wise, this game does have some stats like resistance, where you can put in level up stats into, and the actual mechanic stat-wise doesn't work, so it's just a waste. So stuff like that does suck, but it's far in between, and for the most part, the customizable spot that this game gives you is great. But yeah, anytime an RPG gives you more customizable spots, I enjoy it. I love it. I love it. But as I shared some of my appreciations for this game, let's actually start talking about some of the inspirations and influences that are in this game. Well, actually, let's go to the computer to talk about that. All right, so I know I said that we were going to move topics and talk about some of the inspirations of the game. We're going to do it. Don't worry. Don't worry. I have a bonus thing I need to say, which is probably the most important thing about my positives with this game. Obviously, this has to incorporate all of what I've been talking about before, and it's that it builds discipline in myself. Through playing this game, you will learn how to grow in discipline as a player. And with that bonus done, let's go talk about the inspirations. Now, the very first one should be obvious enough, but maybe some people don't know. They should know Demon's Souls was just put out, but this is actually technically the previous game in the franchise. Dark Souls in many ways is the sequel. Well, now it's the spiritual successor of Demon's Souls. The only reason why Dark Souls isn't a sequel to Demon's Souls and why it is a spiritual successor is because of changing publishers from Sony to Bandai. Because of that, that does mean some inspirations have been carried through, some homages from game to game. But ultimately, that's about it. Now, the next influence that is basically the reason why there is the possibility to be the big boy with the big old sword doing big damage is, well, Miyazaki loves Berserk. And yes, I do mean the anime slash manga that I also greatly enjoy. Miyazaki specifically went for the tone and atmosphere, specifically saying a certain kind of refinement, elegance, and dignity. I'll talk about this a little bit more with the story, but I would say this is what influences some of the NPC quest lines. Also, the mood and atmosphere of being very somber. On top of that, even some of the character designs. And the biggest example outside of the obvious of the big sword, I would say had to be the idea or the theme of hopelessness. The feeling, the constant feeling of hopelessness, and you try and persevere at all odds to change that fate of hopelessness. But that's not the only themes that's present in this game. The team working on Dark Souls made certain to focus on 3 main themes in the game, area-wise. They wanted to make sure that different parts of the area fitted these themes. As I mentioned them, if you have played the game, this should pop out to you and you should be like, oh yeah, obviously, yeah, that makes sense. The first one being Knights and Gods in Anno Londo. The second one being Demonic Chaos and Flames in Lost Izalith. And the very last one is the Death, centered around the Grave Lord of Nido. And then on top of that, they just wanted to sprinkle around dragons as much as they want. Really, their focus on this was to really encapsulate the idea that in pre-existence, dragons were everywhere. But when we dive even deeper into the enemies that we find within these areas, we actually find more influences, funny enough. Usually how it goes. And throughout both the character designs and even sometimes the story, we find a lot of parallels to Greek mythology, Japanese mythology, French existentialism when we're talking about the philosophy within this game, and probably the biggest one specifically is proto-existentialism from the philosopher Frederick. And a lot of these are with just character designs and creatures' origins, like we'll see as some aspects of, well, gargoyles and dragons sometimes. But leaning in more in Frederick's study of proto-existence, this is specifically what it was that he studied, because it's not the normal definition. See, Frederick's contribution to existentialism was the idea that men must accept that they are part of a material world. Regardless of what else might exist, as part of this world, men must live as if there is nothing else beyond life. A failure to live, to take risk, is a failure to realize human potential. I would say this is very different from what we would normally know of existentialists. While they both almost share a hopelessness, this one has, well, you have to at least make the most of what you got. This is all we have, this material world, and without making the most of what we got, you are failing as a human being. This is even more emphasized with the idea or the difficulty of this hopelessness present in the game. This pushes the players to make the most of the situations he's given. Yes, the bosses are hard, but they're not unbeatable. Sure, maybe I can't block this enemy's attack, but I can still move around, I can still possibly dodge. Yes, maybe I lost my souls and I lost all this progress I could have had, but I could still keep moving and I could still have a chance to fight the boss again. Again, the normal philosophy of existentialists is about absurdity, meaninglessness, and the end of the universe. And this stark contrast of, instead of that, hopelessness, falling to it and becoming hollow, instead actually making the most of it and pushing on, persevering, I think it's great. The hollowing that's present within this game of giving in to this hopelessness. Honestly, as a player, my favorite aspect of this was something I didn't realize until much later while playing the game. It's something that I technically experienced personally. Outside the curse of like, oh, how is it that your character keeps dying but keeps on coming back? That's because of the curse. But the effects of hollowing. Can your character actually be affected and become hollow? When looking on Steam and achievements of how many people have beaten Smog and Ornstein, it says, well, you can see on screen, when those people have stopped and have given up, they themselves, their character, their protagonist, hollowed out. When I first said I played this game, I hollowed out. But when I started again, I persevered and refused to hollow out. While it's never said that this is actually real and there is this connection, just looking into the lore of the story, it just fits so well. And I believe it makes the story just connected much more to the player. Now, the last thing I should mention about influences in this game should be obvious, but is some of the character locations. The most known and the one that stands out the most has to be Anno Londo, the beautiest place in this game. And it's not surprising because a lot of locations are, well, on the outside, based on Gothic cathedrals. Going aside, we see it specifically modeled in the main castle, mainly modeled after Milan Cathedral, a very famous Catholic cathedral. And it's interesting to see that aspect and its connections with the god in this area. And again, it just fits so well with each area's theme. I mentioned how I was going to talk about some of the creatures that's in this game that's influenced. Now's the right time. Let's head back to the table and I'll get to it. Let's go. Now that we're back here, let's talk about some of the problems that might come with playing Dark Souls 1 as a Christian. Again, I believe this is important as Christians to talk about, well, just possible problems that within the games we play. So it is important to just be aware of what's in this game. Honestly, the first one has to be really just some of the bosses. This game is a setting of dark medieval fantasy, and with that, in a somber theme. And so, because of that, you have some, well, disturbing bosses. The two I can think about is the Gaping Dragon and Pinwheel. I'm not going to be showing them, mostly because for anyone who wants to play this game and wants to enjoy the surprise of this character, that's okay. Gaping Dragon for sure is the first one where you're like, oh, I was not expecting this creature to look like this. And I would say this is the biggest example of a creature slash enemy that really looks back at the influence of Berserk. You look at Berserk or you look at this and you're like, yep, I could see some correlation. Like if you said there's correlation, I could definitely believe it looking at that. But beyond looks, it's nothing where it's gonna give you horrible nightmares or demonic dreams. There's nothing wrong there. It is something where it's like, oh, there's some imageries in this game. We're like, oh, okay. Dark Souls is very tamed and it's not one you should worry too much about it graphically being disturbing. The reason why I mentioned Pinwheel, because his design isn't so disturbing, it's more specifically because of his lore connection. And it's mostly because of his designs of his three masks, of almost a father, mother, and daughter. And the aspect of the lore has to do with basically the fusion soul of, well, that family, and its whole motive as a boss is trying to ultimately in the end divide the souls back into a family. It's just a sad story, basically. But outside of that, it's nothing really that should be a problem for any Christian. Now, the second thing that's possibly a problem for Christians is this game's storylines. This is outside of the game's main quest. This is its NPC side quest, which has also made the game well known. If you haven't ever seen Solaire, then I don't know how you've missed him. He is a radiant person for sure. But while I say it's possible that these storylines could be a problem for Christians, it's a stretch, to be honest. Mostly because these storylines aren't bad, they're just very sad. Every storyline in the Dark Souls franchise is somber, which is fitting for the game's themes. It really does work and emphasize that, which I think more NPC storylines should do. It should support the main theme, the main story. And honestly, outside the gameplay, as I really enjoyed it, this is what made me a fan of Dark Souls. Well, I really enjoyed the respect I got for playing the game because of its difficulty. It wasn't until doing some of the NPCs or some of the NPCs interacting with me for me to actually really enjoy it as a fan. So again, it's sad, but honestly, the storylines are just really great. Dark Souls 1 is a genre-creating game. It's amazing, and I love it. Mostly because of its storylines and its aspects that this game tells through hard difficulty, obscure storylines, and just interaction. All within an unconventional style. This game's amazing, but it does have its flaws. Bed of Chaos, anyone? Am I right? If you're a Christian wanting to play this game, again, as always, it's your decision. I'm only here to talk about and discuss influences and philosophies and just, you know, have some conversation about the game. But if you want to play it, I say go for it. It's enjoyable. I am right now going through play it right now, so if you want to watch a playlist of me while playing this game, do it. And do it while playing the game. I don't know. I'm doing a faith build, so watch me try to remember things of the game. But I should probably get out. Okay.